Well, good afternoon. So Winston Churchill once said, the toughest three things in life are trying to climb a wall leaning against you, trying to kiss a girl leaning away from you, or giving an after-dinner speech. I think he did not contemplate a speech before cocktail hour. So I would say that I would submit that this is not the easiest time, but and I know that I'm standing between you and an open bar. Quite a challenging place that I find myself. But I want to be respectful of your time and provide a significant amount of time for questions. So my friend Bob Walker extended the invitation to be here tonight, and I'm grateful for his friendship. I previously had interned when I was in college on Capitol Hill, and I interned for the committee that he chaired. And so ever since I found myself a member of Congress, I still intern for Bob. And it is a sign of respect and affection that I say that. So, Bob, thank you so much, and great honor to be with you. But I certainly appreciate you all being here and engaging in Washington. This is what business leaders must do, absolutely must do. Washington produces better policy, whether it's a conservative or a liberal party or whatever your makeup is. We need business folks engaged in this process. Community leaders in my district are engaged in public policy at the schools for economic development. Well, at the national level, those things need to happen as well. And so I'm very grateful that you're here and engaged in that process. So I have two different roles in the House of Representatives. I'm the Vice Chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. We have oversight of the Federal Reserve and any number of banking regulators here in town. We have oversight of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We have oversight of real estate and the capital markets. Very significant purview that we have on that committee, and this is my sixth term on that committee. I'm also the Chief Deputy Whip. Now, no one understands what that role is. It's a very unique thing. How many of y'all have seen House of Cards? Okay, it's good enough. So you all know my job. But let me just tell you one thing. My job would be far easier. My job would be far easier if I could kill people. So the role of the whip appoints a chief deputy whip on the Republican side of the House. It's a very unique position. And so I'm in an appointed position at the service of the whip, but also the members of the House of Representatives. Because on any given day, you can have 100% of the power in the House of Representatives if you get 218 votes. And if you do not get 218 votes, a majority to pass legislation, you perhaps could get 0%. You could find yourself in a majority, the majority party on the House floor, and lose issues on any given day or win them. And in the House, the power goes with the vote. In the Senate, it's a much more complex process. I think of the Senate as 100 individuals holding hands, and as long as everyone is holding the person next to them's hand, everything works. It's fine. But if one person objects, that's where the fun ensues in the Senate, and the chaos ensues in the Senate. In the House, because of our numbers, it means that we have confined rules. We have a process. We can legislate in a timely fashion, react quickly to an issue, and get things done in a fast manner, and oftentimes bipartisan, and a bipartisan vote. Now, on the Senate, it's a much more complex process, but in the House, we can take care of business in a very expeditious fashion if we set our mind to it. And so I want to give you just a handful of opportunities, a handful of thoughts about the environment we're currently in. Obviously, with a divided government, there are obvious, very straightforward risks. And what I mean by risk, I mean the risk that nothing will get done. And so that's obvious. But in divided government, you also have an obvious understanding from members of both parties that you do have to compromise on major pieces of legislation if you wish to get anything done. And so in this environment, we had the first 2 months of this year were very challenging for us to get major things done. The Senate has had about a 4-year backlog in terms of how it's been run. And I don't mean this as a partisan knock, but Harry Reid, as a majority leader, thought it best to confine the number of votes that they would have in the Senate, and thereby there would be less risk of bad things happening. Bills that the president wouldn't want to sign getting to his desk, his members of his party not having to cast votes on a number of tough issues for their reelection efforts. Things that majority leaders oftentimes will make decisions in a strategic approach. Well, the strategic approach was to have a limited number of votes and a limited number of amendments on bills. Well, that was the way it worked for 4 years. In the first month of the Republican majority with Mitch McConnell as majority leader, again, I'm not a senator, so I don't really have to tout anything that they're doing, even though I'm a Republican. But Mitch McConnell said we're going to have an open amendment process. They had more amendment votes in the Senate in the month of January of this calendar year than they did in the full calendar year of 2014. Now, that is a shock to the system. That is a shock to the system. And so it took senators a little while to realize that things are going to move, and if things are going to move, you need to participate in that process. And so it took them a little while, but after 2 or 3 months, legislation is starting to flow in the United States Senate. Just this past week, Loretta Lynch is brought up for a vote as Attorney General. You had human trafficking bills that we had passed last Congress out of the House of Representatives. Anti-human trafficking pieces of legislation that oftentimes get brought together with a number of complex and very challenging social issues that people have fixed perspectives on. And those bills were able to make it through the Senate this week. So, and at the same time, you have the Senate Finance Committee moving a major trade bill and doing so in a bipartisan way through the Senate Finance Committee. You have the Senate Education Committee moving on a unanimous vote to rewrite the education laws at the federal level. Well, major things are happening in the Senate. And what has happened in the House? Well, what we've been able to do with both the House and the Senate working together, just a month ago, we had the largest change to Medicare that has occurred in a decade. And it was through what's commonly called the doc fix. This is the sustainable growth rate measure that is contained within Medicare. And at the same time, we had that major change to how doctors are paid. We also had, within that bill, means testing for Medicare. Very high earning individuals in retirement will have to pay more of their share for health care. Now, that is a major bill, a major piece of legislation, and in the House of Representatives, it got 392 votes. Now, I'm in the business accounting votes, but what I would have to compare this to a vote of as such enormous consequence as the changing of the name of a federal building, right? In the House of Representatives, you don't get 392 votes on consequential policy. You get 392 votes on changing the name of a building, honoring some person who's been long dead and widely loved and respected, such highly partisan people as golfers and football players, right? And so for us to have 392 votes on a piece of consequential policy is an amazing thing. Now, the Senate passed it last week. The president signed it yesterday. This is a serious thing that is occurring. Now, it doesn't mean that everything is going to be done in a bipartisan way in the House or the Senate, but for the most part, it will. And so what I want you to take back is an understanding that Congress doesn't work in a straight line fashion. We work in many respects like a strong middle schooler works on their schoolwork, right? So on any given day, your 8th grader will not do his or her homework. Now, actually, I would say his homework. We know that she'll do her homework. So on any given day, they may not do their homework, but when crunch time comes in, they'll get things done, right? That probably defined my college career more than I'd like to admit. But Congress, on any given day, may not be able to get everything done, but there are these breakpoints, points of leverage, where we can actually get major pieces of legislation done, achieved, and signed into law. And so you have to realize that month by month, week by week, you may have frustrations with Congress. But from time to time, we will do the right thing, and it will have a positive effect. And so the second thing is, we have a wonderful system of government. The Founding Fathers were brilliant in their design. They did not design it to be an efficient institution, though. Efficiency would be defined by putting one person in charge, probably my wife, and ensuring that that one person has the totality of power. That is efficiency in government. Inefficiency is dividing things 2 ways. Highly inefficient will be dividing it 3 ways. As we know, our 3 branches of government don't often get along, and that was part of the beauty of the design. But the idea with that is the protection of civil liberties, the protection of the American economy, and the protection of the broader freedom of our individuals in this country to decide for themselves what their American dream is truly. And so our system of government was not designed to be efficient, but it was designed to be accountable to the people. And elections do have consequences, and as a consequence of the last election, we will see different policy than we've seen in the last few years. So be hopeful. Be hopeful. But do not be hopeful if you're going to sit on the sidelines and not be engaged in this process. Then you're leaving it to less informed people, less knowledgeable people that can help shape sound public policy. And so certainly your engagement here is a very important thing. But making sure you maintain those relationships with your policymakers, regardless of policy, regardless of partisanship or particular views on individual pieces of policy. You should have a relationship with your member of Congress, with your senators, and you can have an impact that way. You don't have to leave it up to lobbyists or other groups. You should have those relationships for yourselves. And so that's my small pitch to you today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about financial service policy, about pushing people in front of a metro train, whatever you'd like. Yes, sir.
My name is Joe Caspides. I'm a CED trustee.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. And I was wondering, what changed from the past several Congresses where it's been very hard to get any bipartisan cooperation at all? Is something different happening? Do you get a different feeling from the country? I know you said there's more votes in the Senate now, but basically I am hopeful because I'm seeing more signs of bipartisan cooperation, which is something the CED has been trying to achieve in a number of fronts, like tax reform, Social Security reform, improving health care, getting rid of the sequester and getting a better budget deal, et cetera. And by the way, are you hopeful that any of those things could be taken up?
Okay. A lot of questions there. The question about bipartisanship, though, is a matter of will and leadership. You can't throw 435 members, highly driven politicians, put them in the same room and just think things are going to work out. You have to have some leadership, you have to have pressure, and you have to have really a goal and an agenda. And so there has been a change as a result of the last election. And it's not simply partisanship. It isn't. It's not simply that Republicans are in the majority in both the House and the Senate. It's the fact, it's just the approach in the Senate more broadly that Mitch McConnell says he intends to take bills to the floor and will suffer the consequences of those votes, right? He's willing to take a bill to the floor and not get 100% or even 80% or even 60% of what he wants. And there is a great desire among senators to be policymakers. And I think that's a dramatic change. That has an effect and translates over to the House because my Democrat colleagues look at their Democrat colleagues and participating in education reform, participating in trade agreements, and seeing an opportunity for them to play that same role in the House. But again, the House is a slightly different bird because 218 votes is all you need, and you can get them any which way you want. But when it goes to the Senate, you need to have 60 votes, which means on any given bill, the Republican majority has to have multiple Democrats vote with them. So it's far better to work with a group of folks across the party lines and for people to make those compromises before it comes to the floor. So that approach, I just think broadly the will of the Senate to have votes on tough issues has changed slightly the nature and approach of it. And I think and that has effects on my Republican and Democrat colleagues in the House as well. When they see the opportunity, people will often ask, members will often ask, why should I vote on this if it's not going to be enacted into law? Right? Why go through the exercise? Why cast a tough vote? Why have to go explain this vote to your constituents if it's not going to happen? Why am I going to do this? Very practical, reasonable question. Well, now you can say, well, actually, we're shooting with real bullets. You're not just passing a bill out of the House and seeing it die in the Senate or see the president say, I'm not going to sign it. The president is engaged in this too. And the more he engages, the more leadership you have out of the White House, the more effective Congress is in leading. Thanks. Yes. Thanks.
My name is Roberta Stanley, and I'm a K-12 public education advocate. You mentioned the bill coming out of the Senate Health Committee on a unanimous bipartisan vote. The House took up very briefly the House Education Workforce mark on the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Do you think that the Republicans in the House can pull it together to recapture that momentum and take it up so that we actually get a final product?
Yes. And we'll bring the Student Success Act. And we will bring that back to the floor. The majority leaders has pledged that publicly. And I think we have a great opportunity for a substantial reform of what is now called No Child Left Behind. And the remnants of the 2001 education law changes. I think we have groups on the far left and the far right that have a very similar agenda for what they'd like to see out of the federal education bureaucracy. They both agree they want to see less, and they want to make sure that the power resides back with the states to make those big and important decisions, especially when it comes to designing their own curriculum. So yes, we have a great opportunity to do that, and we will have I think we'll have a substantial vote on once we bring that bill to the House floor.
Do you know what the timeline is?
I do not. We've had a couple moving parts with the trade agenda, with the Trade Promotion Authority. The Senate is acting on marking that bill up in committee this week, and it'll go to the Senate floor in the next couple of weeks. So that is reordered a bit of our agenda in the House to wrestle with that. But we should see that in weeks, not months.
Congressman, my name's Joe Minerick. I'm a member of the CED staff. As a vote counter, when we get to this fall and the public debt limit begins to bite, what's going to happen?
It's a great question.
Thank you and good night.
It wasn't a comment. It wasn't a comment. It was an answer. Look, the debt limit increase is always a challenging vote for the Congress. Let's face it, this president voted against a debt limit increase when he was a member of the Senate. My Republican colleagues always quote that, right? Always quote that. Now, in justification for them to vote no, right? So, you know, it's complex for both parties. But we have a responsibility to make good on our pledges as a nation. It is like your first day as CEO of a company. You open up your predecessor's top desk drawer, and it's stuffed with bills. You can do one of two things. You can close the door, lock it, and act like you didn't see it, or you can actually pull those out, realize that if you don't pay these things, you're going to destroy your company's credit, right? Bring this to the board, bring this to your other members of management, and make a tough decision, not simply just to pay the bill, but to ensure that that never happens again. So the debt ceiling is an opportunity to have a longer range spending agreement. And as a result of a number of battles between the Speaker of the House and the President when it comes to spending, we actually have some budget controls in place now. However ineffectual they may be, how limited they actually are, that they only control, that it's only 1/3 of government spending and it's all discretionary and it doesn't deal with those longer range entitlement issues. But that discussion of the debt limit, the question of how you fund highways could potentially be a part of this mix. How you respond if the Supreme Court rules on King versus Burwell on the Affordable Care or Obamacare state-based insurance exchange subsidies. That could enter the discussion. It could enter, the other part that could enter the discussion is what you actually do on entitlement programs. Do you have means testing of substance when it comes to Social Security and Medicare? Do you have an adjustment when it comes to the age that you're eligible for Medicare matching up in law with the age you're eligible for Social Security? These things are not dramatic in terms of their societal impact. When you change somebody's retirement age that is 40 years old and it means that they have to work 3 more months before they're eligible for Social Security, that is not debilitating to society. Nor should that be a fraught with peril for Republicans or Democrats. You have to make those adjustments as people are living longer. So the opportunity to get that reform passed may be surrounded with a vote on the debt ceiling. Those discussions are ongoing right now, and we certainly have plenty of time to come up with that necessary plan for how we make good on our country's bills, but also to ensure that we have a better path going forward for our nation's budget and for economic growth. One other issue that could enter the discussion as a result of that as well is a process for corporate and personal income tax reform. So there are a number of moving parts for this fall, and the debt ceiling is not simply a problem that you have to deal with. It could be the centerpiece of resolving some longer range issues that we have to fix as a country. So the votes will be there, and it will be likely a bipartisan vote at the end of the day. And I think at the end of the day, we'll be better off for this discussion that we're going to have in the fall. So, all right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. Thanks so much for your questions, and it's an honor to be with you. God bless.